What is going on, everybody? It is Bush Fishing and we are back. We're actually in the shop today. We're not going to be doing any fishing. In today's video, we're going to be saving a Johnson 35 horse 1989. This motor has sat for 15 years, probably a little more, and we're going to be seeing if we can get it to run, going over the whole thing. What I think we're going to have to do is drop the lower unit, inspect it. We're going to be going through all the basic tests that you do, checking compression, checking spark, diagnosing the fuel system, seeing if there's anything wrong there. I'm going to be showing you guys how to do everything, and hopefully by the end of this video we're going to have this motor running and ready for some more life, because the motor is in pretty much mint condition. It looks great. It's a little bit dirty right now, but we're going to get this cover off and dive right into it. Now, before we start, if you guys are new here, I'm Bush Fishing. I make primarily fishing videos, but we also do motor repair, outboard, stuff like that, and boat building. If that's anything you guys are interested in, make sure to subscribe down below. Now, we also have some merch. We got some new sick stuff coming on the website and some deals coming up. So if that's something you want to check out, first link down in the description. Go ahead, give it a look. Now, how I think I'm going to start this is basically I'm going to get the cover off, give it a little look over, and then we're going to start figuring out the first thing we need to do is get this motor to crank. That way we can check compression and check spark. So I do have the battery cables and the harness with a key switch, but there's no key. So we're going to just hook up positive and negative battery power, and I'm going to show you guys how you can remote crank it, stuff like that, and get it to actually have spark. After that, we're going to check compression, spark, and then we're going to jump into the fuel system. I'm probably going to end up pulling the carb off and showing you guys how to clean it, because that's a really important thing. And on these, the 35 and lower down to 15, they all pretty much have the same carburetor. So this will be super good to learn and know how to do, because they're all pretty similar. And we're also going to go over some electronic tests on how to diagnose and test your spark, your ignition system. But for now, I'm going to get this cover off and let's dive into this motor. Alright everybody, while I get this taken off and the battery cables connected, I'm actually going to put you guys to last week when I took the lower unit off. I was going to film this video and then I got stuck doing some other stuff, so I will show you that. Now, in the video you don't see, on the lower unit, which I have sitting right here, there's four bolts going through... There's four bolts going through the bottom like this. Those are the ones you're gonna have to take off. Now, before you take those off, I would disconnect the gear linkage, but in the video, you'll just see me disconnect the gear linkage and pop it down. I'll show you how to do that. So while you do that, I'm gonna get the battery cables hooked up and everything set up for us to start diagnosing this. Okay, down on the lower unit, obviously 2 Phillips head screws on this intake grate. We're going to be taking off both sides, and then once we get in there, you'll see the fitting I'm talking about, where it's just press fit, you unscrew it, and then this whole lower unit will drop down. We'll get it on the bench. I'm only doing this so we don't have to worry about this spinning dry, the impellers in here. The impeller's actually right here. With these impellers, if you spin them dry, the rubber will break, and then you won't know, and next time you put it in the water, it gets shot up into the head, and then you get a water blockage, and it starts overheating, and those are all kinds of problems you don't want, because chasing down a little hunk of impellers really hard to do. But let's get this lower unit off. Alright, so first thing I'm going to be doing is taking the screws off the intake grate. You could drain it first. I might just drain it after. Pop those two off. This might have some silicone in it, so you might need a screwdriver to pop it off. Let me grab one. Okay, before you go cracking plastic like I almost just did, get the screws out on the other side. They're held together like that. And then obviously it'll pop off. Now when you look in here, you will see this is the fitting I was talking about. You're going to use 2 wrenches. The bottom wrench is going to hold the bottom half of it, and the top wrench is what's going to do the spinning, and that's how you're going to get it off. So let me grab some. Okay, so it's going to be a 1/2 inch. If you don't have 2 1/2 inch, just use a 13 mil. Use the 13 mil to hold it, not to do the spinning. 2 wrenches just like that. Kind of hard because there's not a lot of room for you to swing the wrench, so it might take a little bit. But just like that, you can get it moving. Okay, so that was much more difficult for me than it will be for you guys. The main thing, as you can see, or maybe as you can't see, my knee's holding the lower unit up. The problem with it being dropped was I didn't have the room. After I got it lifted back up, I got the room. So now that this is disconnected, all you do is drop down. There's a little rubber piece. Hopefully you guys will be able to see that. There's a little rubber piece that goes below where the fitting goes. That needs to come out. It's split in half. You should be able to just peel it out. Okay, just like that. You pop that little rubber, come on, focus. Pop that little rubber piece off. Just splits in half. Now you lift back up on it, you get the fitting down, and that rubber piece is the keeper for this fitting. All it is like a standard brake line fitting. That rubber keeper holds that in, and then you drop the whole thing out. Woo, that is cold. Why am I doing this in the middle of winter? There you go. So now we've got our lower unit out. Alright everybody, so we're on the side of the motor now. I'm going to show you what we got going here. So, right here, the white cable, this is your positive cable. That's what comes from the battery and goes to this end. Now, we're on the port side of the motor. This is your starter solenoid. The ground wire goes right down there and grounds onto the exhaust cover. And then from the other side, your positive comes out of the solenoid, goes down and goes to the starter. The starter is grounded to the case. So once that gets power, this will run. Now, on the bottom, if you guys can see those two posts down there, one of them's a negative, one of them's a positive. The negative comes from the other side of the motor. This is your gear selector. Now, when this is pushed back, you'll see that black plunger right there gets pushed down. All that is a little switch that connects the ground from the case to the wire that goes to the starter solenoid. So that way, you can only crank when you're in neutral. Now, the other wire, which is going to be on the right side on this, that one right there comes from your key switch. So when you turn the key, it gives power to that. It charges a magnetic field inside of this and moves an iron core plunger up and connects these two to give you full battery voltage to the starter. I actually have some trim solenoids from a Mercruiser that I got from work, so I have one taken apart and one's complete, and I'm going to show you guys how that works just so you get a better understanding of what's going on when you turn the key over and ways you can diagnose it just by hearing it. Okay, so I'm going to try and give you guys a top-down view here on the GoPro, but if I can pull this out, this is a trim solenoid. This came off a Mercruiser. It's basically the exact same thing as the starter solenoid I just showed you guys, but it's for trim, and there's two of these on each boat for the trim pump. One takes you up, one takes you down. So here is the completed one right next to me, and here is one that's taken apart. So obviously I'm going to try and put it together a little bit so I can show you guys better. Okay, so here's how it looks when you get it. You're going to have just a bottom cover plate, and then if you look on the other side, there's tabs bent over this holding the whole thing together. What you're going to do is you're going to take a screwdriver and pry these tabs open. What that's going to do is release this plate, and you'll see down below it, you'll have a little rubber gasket piece that's just kind of for weather sealing. Once you take that off, you're going to have more tabs. 3 tabs here. I'll try and show you guys that as well as I can. But 3 tabs all along the outside, those are going to get pried open. Once those get pried open, you're going to pull this out, and you're probably going to have this little piece of iron fall out. This is your coil. Now, I missed a spot, but there's 2 little wires on there. Those are going to have to come off. Those go to the 2 posts down on this end that we were talking about. One's ground, one's positive. So the wires go on there. You're going to have to resolder them if you're rebuilding one. This is your coil. What the coil does is, on those 2 little wires, one's positive, one's ground. Okay? When you give voltage to that, you're giving it the ground because it's a neutral, and you're giving it power because you're turning the key. That is going to charge this coil. This coil creates a magnetic field. Now, I don't understand it all. Magnetic fields confuse me. But when that happens, you have this soft iron core plunger inside of it. The reason this is iron is because it's magnetic. So, with how the magnetic field works, it's going to push that plunger up. So you charge it up, this plunger comes out, and you'll see on the bottom of this, there's a little plunger. You can push that in. So you give it power, the little iron core comes up, and it hits the plunger. Then, if we pull this cup out, just like that, you'll see there's nothing really important with this cup, but you'll see the plunger that I was talking about. This plunger has a conductive little plate. So all this plate does is it comes up and it bridges these 2 contacts. These 2 contacts in here are your big posts. These 2 posts. So you charge it up, you give it power, the little iron core hits this plunger, comes up, and this makes the contact between the 2 posts, giving you voltage wherever you need it to go. The problem with these a lot of times is every single time this comes up and makes a contact, it's going to spark. Just like when you hook up battery cables or something like that, it sparks every single time. If you can see down in here, one of these contacts is clean and the other one is all black and corroded. Every single time you hit the key, it's going to make that spark on one end. Usually it's the end that's going to the starter. Every single time, spark, 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 it gets blacker, blacker. You can get a little water in there, you get a little corrosion in there. Eventually, when that plunger comes up, it's not going to be able to make the contact because there's too much resistance through that post. So, you can see on the bottom of this, one side is completely black. The other side is clean. The black side's the one that was making the contact. So, long story short, if you turn the key and all you're hearing is clicking, that means that this is no longer good. Now, if you just took it apart like I did, you can clean these off and they'll work. Or you could spend like, on outboards, maybe like $10. On like the Merc Cruisers and inboards, you might just have to buy a whole starter. That was a really long way of explaining how these solenoids work. Now what we're going to do is we're going to hook up a remote starter switch, which basically just gives it power like you're simulating the key being turned, and we're going to manually give it ground, and then we're going to see if it'll crank. Okay, so we're going to go into my extremely messy electrical box. We're going to grab this. All this is an alligator clip. When you push this button, it makes contact between the two of them. Now, what we're going to do, come over here to our starter solenoid. The red end, it doesn't matter which end, but I'm just going to do red so it's easier for me to remember. That's going to go to the right side of this starter solenoid on the key switch side, just like I showed you. If you don't know how to figure that out, go to marineengine.com. That's the site I use. Get yourself a wiring diagram like this. We're going to go, this is split across 2 pages. Here is our starter solenoid. We can see the left end, so let's restart. Battery power comes into one side, and then battery power goes to the other side to the starter motor. These two are the pins we're looking for, the posts. We're going to follow the top one comes down, follow that. Top one goes into the main plug, comes out, and then we're going back on the next page, and it goes to your key switch. Right here, S for start. It's the white wire. So, we know that the battery cable side from the battery is going to be our positive. Now if we follow the other one back down, you'll see right here, neutral start switch. It goes through that little switch and then it goes to ground on the case. So we know that on the left side, that's just how I'm looking at it, the left side is going to be our positive key switch power, right side is going to be our ground. So if we're looking at it, right side is battery power, so I'm going to connect this to the right post on the bottom of it, and then we're going to take the other end of this, which is a black. I don't know why they make it black because they're both positives, but we're going to take the other end and we're going to hook it up to positive on the battery. Okay, now that's hooked up. If I hit this, nothing's going to happen. We need to ground out the other pin and simulate the neutral safety switch being in. The reason I have to do this is because on the other side, since this motor is set up for cables and I don't have it, there's nothing pushing it up on the neutral safety switch. So I have these magnetic test leads. I got them from the Matco guy. I paid way too much for them, but they are actually pretty nice and useful. I'm going to hook my ground up to the other end. I'm going to push my boot over this just so we don't have any sparking. Now, the reason I'm doing this and not just jumping it is because safety. I started on fire when I was working on my 70 horse, so we're not doing that again. But when I hit this button, we should either hear a click or hear this starter turn over. So, you guys hear that? That is exactly what I was talking about. One way to confirm this is multimeter or test light. I'm going to use a test light just for ease. If we hook this end up to a ground and we touch the battery end, you should see the light turn on in this, what's it called? Test light. So, the light coming on means we have power going into this solenoid. I'm going to put it on the other end and we'll see if any voltage comes through. If it's working, the light should come on. If it's not, it'll stay off. So, you guys see that? It's making that super dim spark. It's really trying to let the battery voltage go through, but it can't because of the corrosion in there. So we're going to have to find another way of doing this. Alright, so the other way we're going to do this is we're going to simulate just connecting it straight on. Don't recommend this. Don't do this at home if you're around fuel or anything like that. Let's see if it'll crank. Holy shit. Yeah, she cranks. So that's good. Now we're gonna move on to the next step. This motor already has the plugs out. That's probably why it cranks so easily. But I'm gonna grab a compression tester and we're gonna test compression. All right, everybody, this is a compression tester. This is just a cheap Harbor Freight one I use for at home because my other one had the threads messed up. Now, when you look into it, you have a bunch of different fittings. These are all what thread into your spark plug holes. I know for a fact none of these are gonna work because this is more of an automotive one, but you also get something like this. This isn't as accurate, but it does give you a good press fit on it, and it gives you just kind of a reading. What we're gonna do is take this gauge, make sure there's no air in it. This is your air release. We're gonna hook it on, which is just a quick connection, which is really nice, and now we're ready to check for compression. But before I do that, I'm gonna grab some stable fogging oil. All this is just a light little oil, and since this motor is sat for 15 plus years, I'm going to spray it into the cylinders. The reason I'm doing that is because these rings are probably stuck and this motor is completely dry. It's a 2-stroke and it's premixed, so it gets its oil through the fuel. We don't want these running dry because it's going to score the shit out of the cylinders. So, right down the spark plug hole. Quick couple shots. Now, let's check compression. All I'm doing is I'm going to start with the top cylinder. I'm going to push this in very hard, try and get as good of a seal as I can on it. And with my left hand, I'm going to connect these two and crank the motor over. Okay, we got about 80 psi of compression on that top cylinder. Obviously, this is letting some out. I could physically feel it on my hand, so I'm going to assume it's a lot higher. Let the air out. We're going to try it again on the bottom cylinder. Okay, in the bottom cylinder, we got about 90. We were bumping up to 120. Wish I had the threads for it, but that's good enough for me. We know at the very least they're in range of each other and we have compression, so I'm sure that this motor's okay. Obviously, with the rings being a little stuck from sitting so long, it's going to come up once we start running it, but that's good enough for me. The next thing we're going to do is check for spark. There's multiple ways you can do this. You can put the spark plug in the boot and hold it up next to a ground and see if you can physically see the spark, which is a little less safe, or you can use something like this. This is an inline spark tester. You leave the spark plug in and you hook it up to this, and there's a light that's in here and you'll see the light come on every time it sparks. That's the way I'm going to go, just because I'm trying to do everything safely. So I'm going to install these spark plugs. These are just a common Evinrude one. BPR 7HS, I believe these are NGKs. These are probably not going to be the final spark plugs that go in here, and these are also probably not gapped right, but they're going to do just fine for now to let us know if we have spark. It seems to me that the top spark plug hole is stripped, so it's either going to get a Healy coil or another one, but we'll get to that when we get there. Okay, I'm going to start with top cylinder again. Hook it up to the coil, hook the other end up to the plug, and we're going to crank it and be looking here. I'm going to leave the other one unplugged just in case there is some residual fuel in the carb. Doesn't start, but let's grab our key, and hopefully you guys can see this. But let's crank it and see. I got fucking shocked. Okay. Obviously that one had really good spark. Let's move on to the bottom one. Same thing with the bottom. I don't know why I got spark there, but really good blue spark on the bottom, and I actually saw it coming out of this one too. So this motor has spark, it has compression. The last thing that we're gonna need to mess with is fuel. Okay, so let's quickly go over the fuel system. This wire is actually already disconnected wire, a hose. This comes under the power head and goes to the other side. Right here is where the fuel gets plugged in from the tank. After that, fuel comes up this hose, goes through a filter and goes into the fuel pump. This fuel pump looks like it's ran off of just the case. There's a vacuum that moves the diaphragm in and out. That forces fuel through, comes down this bottom hose, goes back around the other side of the motor, and under the starter, right where we can't see it, it goes into the carburetor. This is your carburetor up front. This is your choke solenoid. When you hit the button up on the dash, it'll pull this closed and choke your motor out. Down here we have a drain plug that's open, so that actually gives me hope that this motor was drained. I am actually just going to see if this motor farts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take some carb cleaner, crack the throttle wide open, spray some into the cylinders, and just see if this thing will fart. It's not enough to have it running for a long time, so I'm not worried about that. Since we don't have the lower end on, we can crank this fine without worry of the impeller breaking or doing anything of that, but we can't really run it for a long time with no water going through. So I'm going to grab some carb cleaner, and this is where it gets a little sketchy. This is where the remote start switch would be nice, because we are going to have a spark over there. Hopefully it doesn't start on fire, but I have a fire extinguisher in here. I'm going to put the straw on this for more accurate spraying. It's important that you use a flammable carb cleaner. If you use an unflammable one, yeah, you won't be good. So crack throttle wide open. 3-shot. Let's come around to the other side, and let's see if this motor will run. Hopefully I don't explode in the process. Spark plugs are hooked up, fuel system's hooked up. Don't know how I'm gonna stop it if I have to, but... just like that. Just like that, folks. Fired up. Doesn't smell the greatest. I wouldn't recommend doing it with the carb cleaner for a long time, because obviously 2 strokes get their lubrication in the cylinders from oil, but that gives me hope. Now, we're gonna make a makeshift fuel system. I was gonna clean the carb, but I don't know if I should since it was clean. I know it'd be a good thing to show people, but maybe I will afterwards, but for now, I'm gonna make a fuel system for it. Okay, so to make our fuel system, we're essentially going to be taking our own fuel and just hooking it up to this fuel inlet. See, there's a hose clamp on here. We're going to grab a pair of pliers. We're going to pull this hose off, and we're going to hook our own up to it. Normally, if this was a normal motor, I would have a fuel line with an adapter. Oh, look at that hose breaking apart. I would have a fuel line with an adapter just to hook it up to the side of the motor, but since I don't, we're going to be doing it on our own. Now, gonna grab some spare fuel line like I have here. This is actually already in 2 pieces, so we're gonna grab this, and we're gonna grab a primer bulb. Now, I need hose clamps on all of this, so gonna grab 2 of our smallest hose clamps. I believe those are 5/16, and I'm going to throw 1 on here, throw the primer bulb on, make sure it's pointed the right way. We're going to grab our 5/16 socket. This is just a cheap Husky 1/4" set. This thing is amazing. 5/16. That's not the right size. I was mistaken. This is actually a 1/4". We're going to tighten these clamps onto there so we don't have any fuel leaks. Okay, that one's tight. Let's do the other end. Same thing, clamp on first. Okay, both of those are on tight. Next, we're going to hook it up. Hopefully this fits. Yeah, well, we're going to hook it up right up here to the fuel filter. Not fuel filter, fuel pump. And I should probably put a hose clamp on that. Okay, so now that our fuel system is hooked up, we have fuel going into the filter. Fuck, why do I keep saying filter? Pump going down to our primer bulb so we can prime the system. And then we're going to have a remote little mini gas tank mixed with a heavy mixture of 2-stroke oil to keep everything lubricated. And I already have found out. I hooked up the spark tester again. I came into the motor side plug. This wire, following the wiring diagram, is the one that grounds ignition. So I have my ground right here just in case, because once we get this to run with fuel, we won't have a way to shut it off. So that's really important because we can only run this for a little bit at a time. So now I just need to get some fuel and 2-stroke oil, and we'll be ready to run this motor. Alright, so all this is set up, everybody. We have our fuel line in, going to our remote fuel tank. I couldn't find any 2-stroke oil, so I've just got gas that was pre-mixed for my boat in there. We're going to pump it up, sucking some gas in. We're going to check for leaks now, which I already know that drain was open for the carbs, so let's quickly grab a screwdriver, tighten the drain up. That should be good enough. There's no ring. All right, let's keep pumping, seeing if gas squirts anywhere. I can hear the carb filling up. Okay, my primer went hard. I'm gonna do a really good check over here. We're completely dry, so I would say we're ready to go. That grounds out ignition. Pull our inline spark tester out. What do you think, folks? Is it gonna start? Okay, spectacles, testicles, wallet, and watch. Please, God, don't kill me. All right, let's give her a go. Let's give her a little throttle. Okay, we're getting there. Gave her a little juice. I'm shaking a little bit because I did start on fire my whole body once. Hey, I'm gonna give it one more with a little more juice to see if we can get it run for a little bit, but without the lower unit on and without water going through this head, I'm not gonna risk it. Now that's what I'm talking about, folks. 15 years later, didn't even have to clean the carb. That's what happens when you take care of your shit. Yeah. Woo, buddy. That is a really pretty motor, and I'm super happy that it was actually idling on its own. That never happens. All right, little smoky in here. And I didn't start on fire this time. Let's go. Alright everybody, I am super happy with how this motor turned out. Hopefully you guys learned something on just how to go through if you're buying an old motor, if you have a motor you don't know anything about, that's just been sitting, what tests to do, and how to safely do things. Obviously, me jumping the solenoid wasn't the safest thing in the world, especially with gas in a closed shop. But hopefully that gave you guys some tips. I do still have some work to do. This lower unit right here is missing the entire bearing carrier and reverse gear, so I'm going to see if I can find another lower unit, or I did look up the parts on marineengine.com. Obviously, that's the site I go to. They give you all the diagrams like we were looking at before, and they sell parts, which they are very good parts, and they come in time, which is good. So if I do buy the parts, I'm going to do a whole video on rebuilding a lower unit. Otherwise, I'll buy a new lower unit and do a video on how to service them. But for the main power head and side of this motor, everything's good there. I'm gonna do a video on how to clean the carb on it. It's gonna be a separate video, which is gonna be really in-depth on how to do everything and make sure that you have a good carb. Obviously, this one's good enough for now for it to run, but I still am gonna take it apart just because I don't want someone or me on the water and then having problems, because right now, obviously, it was only idling for a little bit. We don't know if the float's gonna stick, if it's gonna run out of fuel at the top end, stuff like that. But if that's anything you guys want to see in the future, make sure to leave a like. Other than that, this motor's pretty much good. We just need some parts, so hopefully you enjoyed. Make sure to leave a like, comment, subscribe. You want some bush fishing merch like this, first link down in the description below, and we'll see you guys in the next one.